Hi there, you. Is that a new? It's nice. It suits you. Anyway, hello, Adam Cleary from FourFourTwo here, and as you may be aware, Declan Rice went to Arsenal. He cost 100 million quid, he's made Arsenal look great, and for them, that's really good. But West Ham United, despite having this simply enormous pot of cash and now an enormous hole in their squad, haven't bought anybody with, I'm not wearing a watch, 2 days until the season starts. And that's bad. But news reaches these fair, and let's face it, quite large ears, that Edson Alvarez is arriving from Ajax, and he is the man to replace Declan Rice. And is that a good decision? Well, yes it is, but only in the most unnecessarily complicated roundabout way you could ever possibly imagine. Let's go on a journey. Alright, so if you are a West Ham fan, I imagine you probably want to know some stuff about Alvarez here. So I'm not going to shortchange you, we will look at that, and then I'll get into my ridiculous point I'm trying to make immediately afterwards. So what does he do? Well, he is a defensive midfielder. Everyone thought he was going to be the next big breakout star of that Ajax team, but a move never really happened. The top teams just weren't quite sure on him, and now he's going to West Ham. Now, Declan Rice in West Ham system played round about here, and I know they used like 20 different systems last year as they were trying to work out how best to get Paqueta involved, but this was the Conference League system they used, so off Paqueta was weird. Anyway, I'm not talking about Paqueta. Declan Rice, he plays at the left side of a double pivot. And of course, Alvarez? I'm never totally sure which one it is. I'm going to go with Alvarez. Alvarez, he plays in many different systems, because of course he plays for Ajax, but that will be fine for him. He is a sensational ball-winning midfielder. He harries, he tackles, he blocks off passing lanes, he closes people down. His technique in the tackle is excellent. He's physically really strong. He's a perfect sort of disruptive reducer type in that position. He'll have no problem adapting to the Premier League. Looking at his FB ref profile, you can see that he tends to do all of his defending in front of his own back four. He very rarely ventures into sort of the middle or the attacking third. He likes to patrol that area of the pitch. He's virtually impossible to dribble around. You don't really go past him. He blocks shots. He throws himself in the way of things. He's exactly what you want. Now, he does pick up quite a lot of bookings, yes, and with the changes to the new Premier League rules, which we've done a video on that you can watch here, that's something he's going to have to try and work on, provided he can just take a deep breath every now and then, he should be fine. And he's not just like a one-trick tackling pony either. He's obviously come through the Ajax Academy. He's really good on the ball as well. He gets involved in build-up play. He's great at short passing. You can see from his numbers here, he gets involved every single time the ball is in a build-up phase. So West Ham have got nothing to worry about in that respect either. Like, if you look at this stuff here, the guy is just silk when he's on the ball. He's really good in congested areas. He's hard to press. He's not the kind of reducer that your dad grew up watching. He's a proper footballer who just so happens to specialise in regaining possession and is also hard as f***. So does he replace Declan Rice? No. Yes, that is right. I have lied to you with the title of this video. He is not an adequate replacement for Declan Rice whatsoever. He does not come in and plug that hole. He does not come in and fix the problems West Ham United now have. So is he a bad signing then, Adam? Is that what you're saying? They've wasted their money. And also, no, Edson Alvarez is not the replacement for Declan Rice, but he's a very important part in the plan to replace Declan Rice. Have you ever seen the movie Moneyball? Well, if not, then it's about Jonah Hill, who plays a nerd, and Brad Pitt, who plays a baller, teaming up to basically use data to help improve a baseball team. It's based on a true story, and obviously Moneyball has become this sporting term now anyway, but you can't really do what they did with baseball in football, because it's a far more complicated sport, and there's way too many variables for all that. But the premise, the principle of it, remains the same. Just as the Oakland A's do in the movie when they lose their star man, sometimes you cannot replace a player, but you can replicate their contribution to the team across the pitch. Signing Edson Alvarez is probably the most important part of that, because it allows you to replace Declan Rice's ball-winning contribution, his shield in front of the back four, and his involvement in the early stages of West Ham's build-up, but it is not an adequate replacement in of itself. And this is why you have seen West Ham United linked with both Harry Maguire and Scott McTominay. When you combine the attributes of those three players, then you replace Declan Rice. And I do appreciate, I've already gone off on possibly the biggest tangent I've ever gone off in a video before, but now I'm going to go off on an even bigger one. Do you remember when Cristiano Ronaldo left Man United? It was 2009, Man United had won the Premier League, they'd won the Club World Cup, they got to the finals of the Champions League, they looked like one of the best teams in the world, and Ronaldo looked like the best player in the world. Real Madrid came calling, and despite the fact they got a simply eye-watering sum of money for him, Alex Ferguson realised you cannot replace Cristiano Ronaldo. Instead, what he realised he had to do was build a brand new Man United from the ground up with new players and a new system, but that was going to take time, and in the immediate short term, it was going to be quite painful without Ronaldo's contribution to this team. And thus, Alex Ferguson's solution to losing the best player in the entire world was to go out and get Antonio Valencia from Wigan, Gabriel Obertan from Bordeaux, and a 45-year-old one-legged Michael Owen on a free from relegated Newcastle. Can you even imagine if they'd had social media back then? The response across the internet to those three incomings for that outgoing. And while the season that followed was an obvious decline from the previous one, it wasn't really that bad. They finished second in the Premier League. I think they won the League Cup. They got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. They certainly weren't one of the best teams in the world anymore, but while they were building to be that again, they were fine. And believe it or not, part of the reason for that is because of those three players. First off, Wayne Rooney was able to replace Cristiano Ronaldo's goals. That was always something Ferguson had in his back pocket. He was going to play him more centrally and they wouldn't have too much of a drop-off in goal scoring. But the other stuff he brought to the team, each one of those players specifically had in their locker. Valencia, before he was converted to this world-class right-back, was at the time a really direct right-winger who held his width, who stretched teams, would get to the byline and put crosses in. And while, of course, Valencia was never going to replace all the things Ronaldo was capable of, he did replace his assists. He got 13 in that first season. Gabby Obertan, despite being considered a massive flop at Man United, was still an excellent dribbler with the ball. He was a direct runner, he would take players on, he would open up space by beating his man. That was another thing Ronaldo brought to that team. And while obviously it didn't really work out for Obertan, there were still times across that season where his on-the-ball ability, his carrying ability, did tie up 2 or 3 defenders, which left room for other Man United players, just as Ronaldo had been doing. And while he was still sort of thought of as a wide attacking player and he played either left or right for Man United, he did have this inherent goal-scoring instinct, which would see him later go on to be a centre-forward. If there's one thing Michael Owen brings you, even if it's just off the bench, it's that movement in the box. It's that ability to create space. It's that ability to get a goal out of nothing. So you stick Obertan, Valencia and Owen together and you don't get Cristiano Ronaldo, but you do sort of get his contribution to a team across a season. So to wind this all the way back from the magical dreamland I've just been in, Alvarez is not the Declan Rice replacement, but if they can go out and get Harry Maguire and they can go out and get Scott McTominay, you can replicate what Declan Rice was bringing to this team. Maguire in particular is a really, really important part of this because he's a left-sided centre-back who will be occupying the same sort of space that Declan Rice did, but his long passing ability, not his close control or his ability to get in the build-up. We've already seen at Man United, he kind of struggles in these neat and tidy areas, but that's fine. You've got Alvarez for that. His long passing ability that Rice brought to this West Ham team is going to be missed. Obviously, Rice isn't a player you automatically think of with really long, raking, probing passes, but he did have that in his locker, and when West Ham couldn't play through teams, he was a really direct option for them. In fact, in terms of switches of play, which is a long ball, sort of across and forward up the pitch, nobody really in the Premier League was doing that as well as Rice last season. And Maguire, as centre-backs go, and certainly of the centre-backs who are available to West Ham, is probably the best in the league at doing that exact thing. If you think about last season where Rice would drop ever so slightly to receive the ball and play those passes into the wide areas, you'll now just have Maguire bringing the ball slightly further forward and doing the exact same thing. And whisper it, he's a better defender than people give him credit for. He's sort of a meme now, but he is still pretty good if you get him in the right team. And as for Scott McTominay, it's hard to show you any one individual data point that really sort of marks out his similarity to Rice, but you can see here in his own third, he's really comfortable passing the ball, he's excellent in a low block, and I think what David Moyes wants here is not Man United Scott McTominay, but Scotland's Scott McTominay. He's a bit of a loose end at Man United. There's not really any one job that he excels at, but for Scotland, he is simultaneously brilliant as a midfielder in a low block. He's great at sort of holding his position, at covering for space, and challenging for the ball in his own half. He then progresses the ball up the field really well. He carries it, which is obviously something that Rice used to do really well. And finally, he arrives late in the box incredibly well. Now, you might look at these goals he scored for Scotland and think, I don't really remember Rice ever getting those, but that was the point. That was a part of Rice's game that he himself admitted he needed to improve on. David Moyes had even said he wanted Rice to be better at doing that, so you kind of don't replicate what he was doing, but you can replicate what he was trying to be better at. So just to Frankenstein this up a bit, this is sort of the profile that makes Declan Rice so important to West Ham, and if we just take a little bit from Alvarez here, yeah, and a little bit from Maguire, yeah, let's get that in, and there's McTominay, I've not got a stat for it, but you sort of imagine it. You put that together, and you haven't got Declan Rice, but you have maybe got his contribution across a team. And the reason I gave you the whole Man United analogy is because David Moyes is not merely trying to plug the Declan Rice shaped hole and carry on as normal. He knows if he's going to still be at West Ham in 2 or 3 years, he's got to build a new West Ham that's not so focused around one player or their contribution. But by getting these players in now, you can probably still use them for whatever new system you're going to do, but they do at least make the transition a lot less painful. So yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that if West Ham can get in Alvarez and Maguire and McTominay, yes, they will of course still massively miss Declan Rice, but just probably not as much as you might think. And yeah, you know what? You're right. That is the weirdest video I've ever done. But I mean, hey, if it was your kind of weird, the subscribe button is right there. And if it wasn't your kind of weird, I promise I do far more straightforward, normal, stats-based, nerdy ones just as often. Genuinely though, I know I do bang on about it quite a bit, but subscribing really does help us out. It's the one thing we can sort of point at and show the people who matter what a good job we're doing. So if you do enjoy this, or you think maybe you might even in the future, the button is right there. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you think other West Ham fans might get a kick out of it, if you think it's really stupid and just want to laugh at it with your friends, please do share it around. That does also help us out massively too. In the meantime though, I am available on Twitter, Instagram, Threads to continue this conversation at Adam Cleary, CLERY, and of course get FourFourTwo absolutely everywhere. We've got a fans fantasy Premier League for you this year. I'll be putting the link in the description below. We would love as many people as possible in that so you can see whether or not you actually know way more ball than all of us do. In the meantime though, thank you so very much for watching. I've been Adam Cleary. This has been FourFourTwo. I hope you've enjoyed it. Nice to see Brad Pitt, wasn't it? And I'll see you soon. Goodbye.